Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's my pleasure today to be here with Gabe Escobedo, who's really a really cool, fascinating, rising political star. I'll say that about him. He is somebody who kind of emerged onto the scene a couple of years ago, and I'm just really looking forward to have a conversation and talk to him because he started doing some great things. He's continuing to do some great things. Here's a guy who just got appointed to the Civilian Formation Commission. And so he's going to be right there at the heart of some really important decisions as it relates to the police department and equity. And he's also on the Santa Barbara City Planning Commission, and he's doing a great job there. And he's just somebody who I think we're going to have a great conversation with. How you doing, Gabe, today?
I'm doing well, Josh. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the polite and generous introduction.
No problem. Gabe, let's dive right in with what you did most recently, and then we'll kind of go back a little bit. But you were recently appointed to the Civilian Formation Commission, which is a panel of 13 people who are basically going to decide what the civilian police system, is what they're calling it, is going to look like. So can you talk to me a little bit about why that was important for you to apply, and what are the issues that you're going to be focused on as you look to form this process, this system, this review board that the police department's going to have?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question. So for those that got to watch my interview, I brought for city council, I brought this up, and we'll probably delve into it a little bit later when we talk about just kind of my background. But for me, this is an incredibly personal topic. My life was affected and has been affected quite a bit by what some people dub as a justice system, and I and others talk about it as an incarceration system, right? And most notably in my life is I grew up in a single parent household with my mom, my brother, for much of my childhood, my sister, her husband at the time, my nephew. And my mom would work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And my dad, for most of my childhood, was in and out of prison. Drug addiction was an issue. I had family members who have been incarcerated. I have friends who either never made it, have been incarcerated, have had those experiences. And as I've grown up and I've kind of thought about these issues, I've done the reading, I've been able to move to different parts of California and get an education and have these conversations. What has struck me the most is just, and this was in that Independent article, is just how insidious this system is, right? And it's not only insidious, it's resilient. And the reason why it's so resilient is because it has so many different levels. You have aspects at the federal level, the state level, county, city, on university campuses, K through 12. And so in order to address it and really focus on what it is supposed to be, it's supposed to be there for safety. We tell ourselves that it's supposed to be there for rehabilitation. But one of the things that I've witnessed in my life is I vividly remember when my dad was on the up and up and he was trying really hard. And even then, we think about the ways that we punish so beyond the time served. And it's people leaving prison with debt, right? And some of that debt is not even related to the crime that they committed. And then on top of that, a stipulation of the parole is that they have to pay that debt. And then we make it as hard as possible for them to get a job. And so it becomes this cycle where recidivism is the norm. And the reason why I applied to the Civilian Formation Commission is it is the opportunity for us to address it at the city level. And when I think about this topic, I don't have kids, but I have nephews and nieces, and I think about a lot about the world that I'm gonna leave them. And when I see kids, I live on the east side now, so when I see kids riding their bikes, playing basketball, sometimes ding dong ditching my house, I think about them too. And we need to break the cycle, and this is our opportunity to do it at the city level. And one of the things that I think we need to celebrate is this is the most diverse commission or board, and I'm willing to say in the history of Santa Barbara, right?
Yeah.
And we have people of different races, different life experiences, different gender, sexual orientation, different abilities, and in a year where we have a lot to thank Black women for it, we need to thank Black women for this. And so, as you know, this was brought on by Crystal and Simone and others, and it's at a time where there's the most political will possible for us to make a real difference. It's an opportunity that I wanted to be a part of, and that I didn't want to miss that opportunity to provide an oversight body with real authority, right? This can't be about show. This has to be about real authority and accountability. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I'm excited to be a part of. And I'm hoping to bring my life experience, the skills that I've built through both education, now on planning commission, and just try my hardest to make sure that we can move the ball a foot, 2 feet, as far as we can on this. And then the job doesn't stop there. This is the first of many things that we need to do for our city to truly address policing, safety, resources for our city, so that for this next generation and the generation after, we can break that cycle.
That's a good point. Is that we've gone so far since June 1st, 2020, but I think some people might forget how we got here. With Simone and Crystal and some others, of course, but them as sort of the leaders of that. And so you had strong Black women who were like not necessarily following the path that had been set out by others, but carving their own path, and it has led to change like really quickly, and that process is still going. And so it's a good acknowledgement, that and how we got here. Can you talk about your experience a little bit? I mean, you talked about how these issues are close to home. And when I read Nick Welch's piece on you, you talked about how you always have your identification with you and your registration, and you're ready to do that. I think that it's really easy for people to think that racism is just the flagrant or the blatant or the obvious, the name calling or the rampant discrimination. And so it's easy for people to say that doesn't exist anymore. Okay, racism doesn't exist anymore because that doesn't happen. But I think and I think we both know that there's like this whole other area that's actually even more insidious, because it happens in little points over time, over and over and over and over, and you can't really say that one thing, but when they accumulate, all of a sudden you feel as though, wow, I have this sort of mentality where I've been beaten up for years, and everybody over here is saying, oh, that doesn't happen anymore. So can you talk about, here you are, you're a professional, and you're doing really good things, but can you talk a little bit about kind of what your experience has been like with this sort of the way you've been treated by leaders and authority figures?
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit it on the head, and it's something that I talked about in my interview and in my application letter to council for the CFC. Is Racism isn't always as blatant as we sometimes see in videos, or even when we saw during the difference between Black Lives Matter protests and the insurrection that took place in the Capitol. It's not, and oftentimes not that blatant. And it's written into policies, and it's written into the structure of how we build mechanisms of power, right? And so for me, I remember growing up and I was oftentimes on my own. My mom's working all the time. I didn't have my dad around, so it was kind of me and my brother. Very little oversight, but I would have friends, right? And they had their dad who would have the talk with them. And so I learned very early on from discussions is, okay, the glove compartment, that's for your tissues, that's for all of the stuff that you don't need when you get pulled over. But the center console that is right there next to me, that's where you keep on the very top your insurance, your registration, because the last thing you want to be doing is reaching over and whatnot. So I bring that up because those are the calculations that we have in community members now, that calculations that they make. Oftentimes, and this still happens to this day, is I'll walk into a store and I almost feel compelled to buy something because I feel like if I walk out with buying something, they're gonna think I stole something, right? And so
it's so funny. I don't interrupt you. I do the same thing. Like every time I walk into the store and they don't have what I want, it's like I'm doing something. I just need one thing, and I'll walk out almost like, damn. Like I feel like they're thinking I'm gonna, like, why didn't you buy anything?
totally.
And I don't know that a lot of people relate to that, but it's just like, I feel like such a moron, and I'm trying to figure out my path. Like, how do I get out of here without being noticed the least? Like, I haven't done anything. I just decided not to buy anything, So
exactly. I'll walk around with my hands in my pockets and strolling around. So it's little things like that. And that is some of the most benign, right? There are other people, Black men and women in particular, that are making these calculations, and that is trauma. It's like that every time that you talk about that embarrassment, that's trauma, and it builds up and it adds up, and there are other ways, just kind of how I think sometimes, and I don't know what the solution is, but I mean, think about what time are our meetings, right? I'm very privileged in the fact that I have a job where I have the support of my employer to flex my hours so I can work later into the night or on weekends to make a 1 p.m. meeting. That's not possible for a lot of people. City council meetings, they're at 2 p.m. So who's showing up to these meetings? Who's showing up to these workshops? I can tell you, because I have the flexibility to attend those, that not very many people that look like me, look like you, look like Crystal or Simone. Not many people with disabilities, or so it exists in that manner too. And what sort of feedback are we taking into consideration when we're talking about really, really important decisions for the city? Whether it's police oversight, housing, climate change policy, all of these things. So you're right. It is insidious in that manner. It's not always blatant.
Yeah. So let's go back in time now. I remember being at Santa Barbara City Hall. This is before the pandemic, and they had the appointment process for new council members. And there were lots of people who applied, lots of good people who applied, and you were one of those people who applied. And I remember just sort of being struck, like, oh, I don't know this guy, who is he? What's he doing? And like, you did a really good interview, you did a really good job. Megan Harmon, she did really good too. She kind of stole the show. So, they end up going with her. But can you talk to me about why how did that become on your radar, and why did you think to apply, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. So, uh, it's so funny. The opportunity, I was living in the 6th district. Uh, the opportunity presented itself, but a lot of things led up to that moment. So I was attending these public workshops, these public meetings. I was watching city council meetings. I was watching commission meetings and board meetings, depending on what the topic was. And a number of things kind of came to me in separate moments, and they all culminated into that application. But the first thought was, man, there are a lot of people that do not look like me. Oftentimes they're older, they're whiter, and it. So that was the first thing, and I thought about that, and it was kind of in the back of my mind, and then there were topics that are very important to me. Housing is one that is, again, very close to home. I have experienced housing insecurity multiple times in my life, where if I didn't have the support system I had, or if things didn't break right for me in that moment, I would not have had anywhere to sleep that night. And so at the time, there were a lot of these discussions about housing policy. There were a lot of discussions about homelessness, and most notably at that time was the Tiny Homes Project, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
I had done some research into all of these different topics that I found really really personal. And it's not to say that the solution to any one of these problems is easy, but the fact of the matter is we have the solutions. We're not waiting for uh, a miracle technology to solve climate change. We know how to solve it. We're not waiting for a miracle approach to address homelessness adequately. We know how to solve it, right? The issue is always where do we get the funding and that sort of thing. And that's a tough enough challenge as it is. And so leading up to the appointment process, there were meetings, there were discussions, there were workshops talking about all of these issues. And there never seemed to me to be enough urgency to them. Because for me and for people who experience housing insecurity, or people who know what the repercussions are for this next generation if we don't adequately solve climate change, or people who are serious about solving homelessness, or a myriad of topics, the job is already hard enough. And so I was disheartened for the Tiny Homes Project in particular, and that's one that kind of really got me going. Is we all know the job is hard enough, the task is big enough, but to see so many people come out, and I get it, the outreach effort could have been better. It was a really quick timeline, but the funding was only there for a finite period of time.
Yeah.
And so to have so many people come out and say, I'm fully in support of this project, but not in my neighborhood, or I don't want, and the way that I think they manufactured it in their mind was that they were going to have homeless people in their neighborhood, and they were going to be urinating in their bushes and drinking on the corners, when in reality, this makes our neighborhood safer.
Mm-hmm.
This is the solution. You're talking about getting these people the support that they need, and it was so disheartening that there were so few people actually saying that during public comment. It was a long public comment period. Mm-hmm. And so then on council, and I get it, there are pressure. It's much easier for me to be sitting at home to say, where was the political courage? I get it. Mm-hmm. But at that time I was fired up, and the opportunity had presented itself, and I was like, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to be the best applicant, but I'm going to give it a shot, because we need that voice on council to push these things forward with a little bit more urgency, right? I was always encouraged to see people like Oscar Gutierrez on city council, and Kathy Murillo on city council, because they looked like me, right? But we needed more urgency. And so I had applied, and this will show you kind of how much of a political novice I especially was at the time, and I still consider myself so. But I went into the process thinking, I'm going to put together the best application letter possible. I'm going to submit the best application possible, and I'm going to interview the best, because this is exactly like a job interview, and they're going to pick the best person based on those things. And I was very wrong. I remember the only two people that I had met with were Oscar and Kathy. And so I only met with Oscar because he reached out to me to ask for a meeting. And so I went and got coffee with him. And he asked me, how did your other conversations go with the other council members? And I was so dumbfounded. I was like, what do you mean? None of them reached out. He's like, you gotta reach out, man. That's how you get things like this, is you have to go and schedule meetings with them and talk to them. And so this was only a couple of days before the appointment where they eventually chose Megan Harmon. And so I'm scrambling, trying to get meetings, and I only got one with Kathy over the phone. But I learned a very important lesson from that helped me when it came time to apply for Planning Commission and now the Civilian Formation Commission. And it was a very good experience, because a number of things. Yes, I didn't get it. I was somewhat disappointed, but from that experience, I met so many people. People came up to me and said, wow, you did a really good job, and I really liked what you said about this topic or this topic. And from there is where I started connecting with people and talking about the issues that I wanted to push forward, right? And just because you don't get on city council, there's so many other ways to do it. And so from that point forward, my mind shifted to, okay, if I'm serious about what I said about being fired up about these issues, you have to stay engaged. So I attended the public workshops. I attended council meetings, planning commission meetings, and design review board meetings, and did public comment and that sort of thing. So it was at times disappointing, at times discouraging, but in many ways, that's kind of how my life story has gone. Is I learn a lot from the times where I'm not successful, and I try as best as possible to leverage those things into future opportunities or future ways to get the same thing I wanted to get accomplished done.
Yeah, you could have very easily just gone away and been sort of soured on the experience and being one of those people who criticizes everything at City Hall. There's plenty of people who run for office or applied for appointments who are like that, but you went the different route and said, well, let me just figure out how to be involved. And that's really what is at the core of why somebody should want to run for city council. It's not for attention on themselves, but for the fact that they care about the city. So, now you're back. It's interesting. This person was before your time, but when you talk about going to City Hall and not seeing people who look like you, we've had a lot of diversity with district elections. But back in the early 2000s, I don't know if you know him, but Babatunde Folayemi was the first Black man elected to the Santa Barbara City Council. And he was amazing. Like, if you ever have any time, go back and watch the city archives of his years. It might have been 2003 to 2005, something like that, 2001 to 2003. So he only served 2 years because it was one of those things where the mayor, Marty Bloom, got elected mayor, and then there was an extra spot that was open, and Babatunde got that last spot, so he got the rest of her term. And then when he went to get reelected, he did not get reelected. But those 2 years were like the most dynamic city council meetings in terms of direct or quotes. Like, this guy was just like so eloquent and so inspirational, and the downside was, he would take criticism for not like thoroughly diving into the staff reports and, the history and researching, but he didn't really need to because he spoke from the heart, and he's just like amazingly well connected to the community that he could actually just talk about these issues in a way that was authentic, as opposed to, maybe somebody who does a lot of research and then sort of like parrots talking points. But that's I always remember about Watune, and then when he was not reelected, thinking, oh man, that's too bad, because he brought a lot to the council. When you ran for that, it's not a job experience. It's not interviewing for a job. Like the most qualified people, for the most part, are not the ones who serve on city councils. They're the ones who are best at politics. They're the best at campaigning. They have money and message and organizing behind them, and they get elected. So it's good that you sort of understood that. And I was at that Louise Lowry Davis Center meeting where everybody came up and spoke about how we want to help the homeless, but not in this neighborhood. And it was kind of the worst of Santa Barbara that I've seen.
Yeah.
Like, these are people who are kind, like liberal Santa Barbara people who were saying things that I would imagine if they went back and listened to them today, they'd be like, I can't believe I said that in public. It was kind of a sad moment, and of course the funding had already been cut in half and the whole thing was falling apart anyway. So, but I know what you mean about sort of like thinking, wow, I can't believe Santa Barbara's not better than this. So you stuck around, right? And then now you're on the Planning Commission. So can you talk about what do you do there that's impactful? What kind of things, what kind of role can you have as a planning commissioner that affects all of these issues that you care about mostly?
Yeah, it's a good question. And for me, I went into Planning Commission with one perspective, right? My application for Planning Commission really revolved around housing, and that's what I wanted to focus on. Is I knew that the nitty-gritty work was happening at the Planning Commission level. And leading up to the application process, I was fortunate enough to have John Campanella at the time, and his term was coming to an end, kind of mentor me and show me, okay, these are the types of things that you're going to see in a staff report. Here's how you read it. Here's how you delve into it. And it was nice because he's a very highly technical person. So I can't tell you how many times I'd be sitting with him and he'd be saying something, I had no idea what it means, and I'm just writing it down so I could research it later. But that's the frame of reference that I went into it with, of just saying, okay, we need affordable housing, right? We need housing, period, but we need to figure out a way on a procedure and some mechanics that is conducive for actual affordable housing for people that live here, for people that work here, but live 50 miles away, people who used to live here, grew up here, but now they can no longer afford to live here. And so that is what I was thinking about when I had applied to the Planning Commission. And if you went back and watched the interview, that's kind of what I talked about. And I think that's what a lot of people think about. But I have enjoyed my time, and that's not to say it's been easy. It has not. But I've enjoyed my time on Planning Commission because it has really given me, there are a wide range of topics that I am passionate about that come to Planning Commission and that I did not expect. And some of those are climate related policies that I didn't expect that those were going to come to Planning Commission. And so it's kind of given me a platform to use my activism through policy, right? And so anyone who's watched the Planning Commission meeting, these are, if you do watch a Planning Commission meeting, you're my type of person, but I understand why people probably don't, is because they're highly technical, getting into the details, figuring out why you use the word may instead of shall in an ordinance, or or whatever what it is, but it's really given me an opportunity to advocate for a lot of the things that I spoke about in that city council speech and that application. And so I've focused quite a bit of my time on planning commission on housing, and it's something that I am still very passionate about today, but quite a bit on climate related issues. And the reason being is I wasn't hearing that from other commissioners when I was watching other planning commission meetings before I was on there. And so I feel that it's necessary to bring that lens into these conversations because they intersect. Housing is a climate related policy, right? If we have people driving combustion engine cars from really far away, that's not good for our climate. And if we're including natural gas infrastructure into our new development, whether it's housing or otherwise, that's not good for our environment, right? So it's, like I said, it hasn't been easy per se, but it's been a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed myself.
Let's talk about like one of the big controversial things that's going to be coming to the city council too, I think, on appeal is Paseo Nuevo, right? So so that is talk about complicated. You know, you mentioned like shall and may and these things. Like that development agreement is like, oh my good, you know, it's like so Paseo Nuevo is the heart of downtown, and it's like all retail is struggling. There's a lot of vacancies that, even though it's not part of the development agreement, Paseo Nuevo and the Ortega building are these huge retail anchors. And there are those who say we need to re-envision what Paseo Nuevo is, that we can't just allow it to be a mall and continue and expect it to be sort of this anchor. And of course, there's you know, it's subjective, but there are people who say the mall should be giving a lot more to the city of Santa Barbara than what it historically has. There are some new things that they are giving, some payments, but you know, the sort of the big picture is, should Santa Barbara like approve this long-term development agreement with these corporate owners, these investors who promise to do what's right for downtown and retail? Or should Santa Barbara sort of say, no, this is prime real estate, here's what we need from you, we need more of this and this and this because we're struggling downtown? And of course the planning commission, like, it was very shocking, and it was a long multiple day meeting, you know, sort of said, no, we can't approve this development agreement, like it's out of date, it's out of touch, and it's not going to work for our needs. And now maybe there's been some revisions, I don't know, but it is going to come to the council. Where do you stand? What should Paseo Nuevo be for this city?
Yeah, and you're right. Those were, I mean, people can probably disagree with the decision or the outcome, but we did our job for those three long meetings. It was over 15 hours, and that doesn't even count the countless hours on weekends and evenings trying to go through that development agreement, because you're right, it's super technical, and really trying to get a grasp for what we were talking about. And so the way I break it up in my mind, and I'll only speak for myself because I can't speak for the other planning commissioners, but what this development agreement is we inherited this development agreement from the now defunct redevelopment agency, right? And at the time, redevelopment agency the funding was kind of viewed as not necessarily, this might be overstating it, but free money. And so there was less incentive to really like drive terms that were really, really good for the redevelopment agency. Well, I won't get too much into the details, but at the time they were banking on the fact that at the time retail was really strong, and they were banking on the fact that it was going to continue that way. And so we had accepted this loan to fulfill, or the redevelopment agency did. They had got a loan from the then developer of the mall to live up to one of the terms and agreements that they would build a parking structure, and the parking structure was more expensive than they had anticipated. And that loan, it had 10% interest compounded, and the only way to pay that loan would be through participation rents, right? So the mall would have to make a certain amount of money. Anything beyond that, the city would be able to participate. And the reason why they made a deal like that is because they thought retail was going to be really strong. Well, in the 90s, we had a recession, and so that wasn't the case. So we weren't getting participation rents. And so that loan, it just racked up. And so it basically precluded us from ever, because now the loan is so large, and the only way to pay is through participation rents. The day that the lease ends, that loan goes away.
Uh-huh.
But what it does is it provides them free rent, right?
Yeah.
And so for the duration of this lease, which is, I think it ends in 2045, we don't get any rent for a really like prime piece of real estate.
Yeah.
On top of that, we're also paying things like recycling fees, and we're paying part of their employee discount parking passes and a myriad of other things, but a really small number that Paseo Nuevo in this new agreement, they said, we'll take on some of those things. It's a few $100,000 in the most optimistic of terms. But at this time, when city council gets presented with a term sheet, basically, and they say, here's kind of what we're thinking for the term sheet. Do you agree that we're going to explore giving Paseo Nuevo an option for 28 more years? So beyond the 45 left. And what that does is it provides them assurance so that they can go then get a line of credit that they can use to do whatever they want, really. And so at that time, that was pre-COVID. And even though the term sheet got a unanimous vote from city council, there were still reservations that were expressed during that council meeting. So you fast forward, and you are now, the second time that it comes to council, before it comes to planning commission, you then have a new council, but we're also in the time of COVID. And so now the Ortega building is empty. The Nordstrom's building is about to be empty, not at that council meeting. 2 weeks after that is when Nordstrom's leaves. And so council then expresses some reservations, but then they unanimously push it forward. And so Paseo Nuevo comes to us and they say, city council is fully behind this. It's 100%, like, here's a development agreement. And I think they thought that it was going to be really easy. They probably never watched the planning commission meeting and seen Leslie and Deborah at work, because my goodness, they are great. So really the conversation, in my opinion, is you have this Ortega building, you have Paseo Nuevo, which is in the heart of downtown. Paseo Nuevo ownership group has control over both leases. And now we have this Nordstrom's building, which Paseo Nuevo has every intention of also acquiring that lease. And you have these three properties that are really close together. They're really close to a De La Guerra Plaza renovation that we're going through. And we also had started this State Street subcommittee for city council to discuss transforming that downtown corridor into a Paseo, or basically a Paseo, right? And it just didn't seem right that we would only look at Paseo Nuevo in a vacuum and get very marginal benefit. And they'll tell you, we invested $20 million, but it's misleading, right? Because many of the improvements that they had made, the ownership group before them, granted, weren't making. They weren't keeping up with maintenance and simple things like painting. And so there's that aspect. And then the other aspect is most of that $20 million went into stormwater management infrastructure. And I'm all for that. So they get some credit there, but it's a requirement if they were going to do any renovation. So it's a little misleading in my opinion, and there was marginal benefit. So between the two options that you gave, it's like, yeah, we have this thing that they want, 28 years. Let's negotiate some actual benefits for the city. And in my opinion, I think you negotiate what is that Ortega building going to be? Mm-hmm. And if they get the Nordstrom's building, that is a prime location for housing. So can we get those things for the city of Santa Barbara? I think we explore it. And it's pretty compelling that we had the original person who was negotiated the original lease. And I asked him and I said, with hindsight now, would you have negotiated this deal? And he said, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. So why would we continue a deal that the person that was in the room wouldn't have negotiated now, given the knowledge that he has? Why would we extend it for 30 more years?
Was that Dave Davis or who was that?
No, that was Coton, Mr. Coton. I forget what his first name is. Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, can you imagine being the Paseo Nuevo owners and running into, like you said, Leslie Wiscombe and Deborah Schwartz and everybody, but, those two have, Deborah in particular, just incredible precision on the issues, and Leslie too. And Leslie presented the whole, changes or the whole list of things. It's like, holy cow, it was for people like us who love governance and love meetings, like that was a legendary sort of series of meetings for sure. So it's coming to the council. You got any sort of like political insider? You have any idea which way they're going to go?
No, I did my job. I think we did our job for those meetings. I was so exhausted after that. So I think I'm just going to sit back and watch and listen to the deliberations. If council members have questions, I'm more than happy to answer. But I put in more than enough work, and I think I'm just going to watch the appeal. I think it's at the end of March.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you just a couple more things. You talked about a couple of times, sort of a theme is having more equity, more representation, more diversity in leadership on the boards. And we talked a little bit about how hard it is for a lot of people to even have an opportunity at a level playing field to be able to consider those things. What do you suggest? If you're like a kid in high school or something who feels like, oh, I can never be like those people, or there's nobody believes in me, or I don't have any, I'm not as smart as that person, and no, my life's really, those real situations that we were in, and you kind of lack the confidence until maybe someday somebody like mentors you, or you somehow, we're all different in how we get there. But what would you say to some sort of young people who feel as though they can never be like you or be like some of the people who they see in these leadership positions? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, and I think the first thing I would say is, so one of the best parts of my job at UCSB is mentoring students, and so I get these opportunities.
What do you do there? Sorry, we didn't talk about that, but what do you do?
So I work for the Department of Recreation at UCSB, and I have a couple different hats that I wear. I'm also on a committee, a Student Medical Emergency Relief Fund, where if students have some sort of medical emergency, we help them out with the cost or connect them with other resources. And so I run their intramural program, which is a pretty large program. We typically have a staff of over 100 students, but we're housed in student affairs, and that affects a lot of how we structure our programs and some of the resources that we're connected with on campus. And I love sports, but the best thing about my job is mentorship. So sometimes I get to have these conversations, right? And it's even baked into how we talk about applying for jobs. You go look at a job description, and even for the most entry level of jobs, it says you have to have 1 to 3 years of experience or 3 to 5 years of experience. And the fact of the matter is, if you're the right person, you're set up for that job or that role or what have you. And the biggest thing that I try to get across is, I have made tons of mistakes. I have been unsuccessful many, many times. And I think the best outcomes have come from some of my biggest failures, right? So look at city council. I didn't get appointed. I didn't get a single vote, but I learned something and I applied it the next time to another situation. I could have very well been unsuccessful that time, but it would have, I would have learned something else. And so I would say, one, that's an important mindset to have, but I think it's also on us now who do have these positions. And I tell this to students all the time, is like, remember all of the times and all the obstacles that you encounter, and make sure that when you're in that role later in life, that you try to break down some of those obstacles and those barriers. And that's something that I hold near and dear to my heart, is I want to make sure that anyone who shared a background like mine never has to go through the difficult and tough times that I did, that I go back and I break down some of those systemic structures that were so hard to navigate, the type of structures that make you want to quit, right? So the people who feel that way, I empathize with that situation 100%. But for any sort of kid or person that feels like, I can't do it, I've worked on many campuses. I've interacted with quite a few people. I've been with organizations, and you come to realize there are a lot of people faking it until they figure it out, right? Like, there are people that have the confidence and that's what you see on the outside, but they are figuring it out as they go, just like the rest of us. And so I encourage people as much as possible, if you're passionate about something, go and do it. I think I talked about how challenging it kind of was at Planning Commission. I kind of briefly mentioned it, but I really experienced it. It was not a space that I felt comfortable in at all. There were times, a lot, I would say for the first 10 months, it wasn't until like November, December, where I walked out of a meeting. I said, okay, I belong. Like, I found my place. I would walk out of meetings and I would just think, man, I don't know if I'm cut out for this, or I don't know that I'm the person for this. But what was encouraging is I was watching council meetings, and Alejandra Gutierrez, right? New council member, and she's on there and she's very passionate. She's speaking about these things, but one of the most encouraging things that I would see is she was not afraid to say, hey, hold up. I'm new. I don't understand necessarily these topics. Like, can you explain it to me so that I can understand? Or she would conversely say, there are people that are watching this that might not understand. Can you explain it so that they can understand? Just saying that, right? That little thing affected me in a big way, because it told me, okay, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to know every in and out of reading design plans and that sort of thing. I have my role. I'm going to advocate for these things. These are the things that I'm going to focus on. And I'm going to trust that other planning commissioners with their strengths, they're going to focus on those other things, right? And so I think the best advice I can give someone who's on the fence, wants to be involved, but they're afraid, is just jump in, get out there. And if anyone is listening or watching this and they want someone in their corner, come reach out to me, please. I would be more than happy to. But I think just getting out there and getting in the arena and being a part of the conversation you're going to learn the other stuff. But our city, our community, we need those people. We need them in these conversations, because these are important conversations about things that really affect people and their everyday lives, and what outcomes they're going to have a decade from now.
You have a mentor or somebody who, and I don't mean like in the official sense where a mentor was assigned to you, but growing up, did you have somebody who came into your life and really allowed you to be who you were, bring out the best in you, inspire you? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about that person?
Yeah. I can't give you, I think about a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think for me, so during my Civilian Formation Commission interview, one of the things that I had said was, I talked about some of the struggles, and I try as often as possible to be really open with people about some of the things that I experienced growing up, or that I experienced even when I graduated high school and moved to places where I didn't know anybody, because I want people to know, like, there are struggles, and that's okay. And I wouldn't trade any of them for the world. But one of the things that I think about, one, I think anytime people talk about a mentor or someone who's influenced me, my mom comes to the top of the list, right? And you're talking about such a strong woman working 2 or 3 jobs. She would work graveyard shifts at CVS, sleep for an hour if she could, sometimes in her car, and then go to her second job. And like, this is a woman that's done it for decades of my life. And just in the last year, she works one job now, and that is her retirement. That's her version of retirement. We joke about it all the time. But throughout my life, there were always these critical moments where things either broke my way or I had someone step in, and that could have changed everything. I wouldn't be here talking to you if I didn't have the type of luck that I had. And I think back at my senior year, right? Of high school. I didn't intend on going to college at all, but I had a friend and he was going to apply to college, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Maybe I'll go visit him. But I had a soccer coach at the time and I think other first generation students will understand this. I don't know how to navigate a college application or the application process. Like, nobody in my family had ever gone to college. So who am I going to ask, right? So I was just like, whatever, I'm not going to go. And a soccer coach at the time sat me down in front of his computer, and he's like, okay, fill out these applications here. I'm going to have you type out this essay. And then we got to the part where I realized, oh, I got to pay for these applications. I can't do that. Like, we can't afford it. And he paid for all of my college applications, and I got in. And so I think back at moments like that. There was a time in undergrad where I was doing poorly at school. I was trying to navigate systems that I had never been a part of. No one ever taught me how to study or to be a good student. And I'm also just out of place. I didn't find necessarily someone who had the same background as me, right, on campus. And I had a mentor, and he's like, listen, I was working at the Department of Recreation at the time on campus at Cal State San Marcos. He's like, listen, you're a good worker, you're a good person, but you're doing really poorly in school. And he found out one way or another, and he's like, I'm going to connect you with these resources on campus. And the only way that you can work for me is if you get your grades up. And so sure enough, through that, I learned how to study. I learned how to plan my time. I learned there were times where, like I said, I was so close to experiencing homelessness, so close to not having anywhere to go. And I had people in my life who were like, you know what, let me ask my mom if you can stay. And to this day, those are now my families. And so throughout my life, I've had all of these pivotal moments, and people who have taught me so much. And I consider myself one of the luckiest people you will ever meet. But I also recognize that in each of those moments, there were failures, right? There were policy failures. There were the structures that exist to put people in those positions. Those are decisions that were made by real people in real positions of power to make those decisions. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so I am, in any way, that's why I shared with you, I feel a responsibility to go back and make sure that we change those structures so that these aren't the outcomes, right? So in terms of mentors, I have a ton, and I learned from a lot of different people. and I think I can learn from just about anyone. But I've been fortunate enough for in those times where I've had a void, people stepping in and filling it for me, and I'll forever be in their debt.
Yeah, that's great. You know, you mentioned your mom having 3 jobs and sleeping in her car, and so sometimes it's like a good, it's important to talk about that, because I think a lot of people will just look at you and hear you and think, oh well, you're good, like you made it, like you must have been fine, and I would argue probably if you asked every planning commissioner, for example, about like what job their parent had, probably was not your situation, and so it's like it's a stark illustration of we're not all the same in terms of our experiences and how we got here. And for some people, they've had to work really hard, and everyone has to work hard, but some people have had to work a little bit harder to just be in the same room as some other people. And so that's a good visual, and if I think for a lot of Hispanic and Mexican American, Latino families and people of color, your story is not that uncommon to us, but for a lot of people, it's like, really, well, we don't talk about those things because we're told it's like a shame thing. Like, we don't need to talk about it. We don't want people to judge us, and so it goes back to all that sort of trauma. It's like, we're not even allowed to talk about these things because we're afraid we'll be judged, even though there's nothing wrong with these things, so it's interesting. Hey, last thing, Gabe, is, you sought the appointment, you're on the planning commission, and now you're going to be on the Civilian Information Commission. And just wondering, and I don't want you to plan your whole life right now here for us or tell us, but I mean, do you sort of see yourself as maybe trying to make another run at the city council someday, or some kind of office? You're young and you're well positioned to go a lot of different directions. And so just put you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah. I appreciate the question. And I'll go back to, it's something I've been asked before, right? Is after the appointment process. And then when I was interviewing for planning commission, it's one that Randy Rouse had asked me. He said, hey, I remember you applied for city council. Why didn't you run against Megan? And I told him the honest answer is, I got to see her in the role, and she did a much better job than I could have done. And so what's the point of me running against her if I think that she's gonna be good and better on the issues that I care about most? So where can I be of help in the community? I thought planning commission. And so now I'm living on the east side in Alejandro Gutierrez's district, and I feel the same exact ways. I watch her and I think that is exactly who we need on city council. And so when it comes to city council, where I live right now, I don't think you get much better. Now, in terms of will I run for something? I think so. I think at some point, yeah. And it's going to be for something or at a time when I think that I can contribute and on the topics that I'm really, really passionate about. And if that time never comes, then it never comes. But I think there does come a time at some point.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, it's you got a long, good path ahead of you, so there's no need to rush things. And I think you hit on a good point, which is some people run for their ego. Some people run because they want the attention on them. And other people run because they really believe in the issues and the causes. And when you really love something, right, you don't have to rush it. It'll probably be there, whether it's today, tomorrow, or eventually, you're going to find it, and the paths are going to cross. And so it's refreshing to hear somebody, sort of say, I can be patient. I can wait. I don't need to be opportunistic right now, So Gabe, my pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to seeing the work that you're going to do in the Planning Commission, again, in the Civilian Information Commission, and have a great day. And I guess we're recording on a Sunday, so go watch the Super Bowl and root for you.
Thank you so much, Josh, for having a little conversation with me today. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Take care.